Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 11 in the 68 Mustang fastback conversion build. Now this car started off with a wrecked, damaged 68 Mustang coupe. I salvaged a few parts from that. If you've been following along, you know that pretty much everything you see is dynacorn except for the rocker panels and the dash. Everything else basically is custom built for this car. Now the intent of this car is to be used for autocross, so I am going to be putting in a different suspension system than what came from the factory. I'm also putting in a Coyote engine down the road. Now in the last video I worked on the back half of the car. I stressed fitting the roof, the rain gutters. I've welded on the quarters to the rear inner structure, to the back of the car. I test fitted the rear valance panel. There's a lot of things that I did, and I always want to emphasize, I stress the details because I want you to understand what it takes to do it and what I feel is doing it the right way. You can also look at the way that I approach these things, and that when I put these cars together, I have to make everything fit. I test fit all the pieces, and I stress that so much. It's imperative. Like, if you don't take care of these things early, they're going to come back and haunt you later on. I've had a lot of people even respond to my last video. I've had several people respond about having to undo and redo things. Ideally, the most important thing is the exterior of the car. You can have a lot of variables underneath. You can have a lot of measurements that are slightly off. But the exterior, that's what matters, how that sheet metal interacts. And so I'm going to show you some details today because what I want to do is work on the front end. Now this front section, I'm using one-piece dynacorn frame rails. So they have a one-piece apron, the shock towers are deleted, and I want to emphasize how I'm going to make these fit. Now you all know that I basically built this jig to hold all these pieces together on top of it, and I can adjust and make changes as necessary. But I want to show you something that you may have seen me do before, but it's important that I show some of this information because not everybody's going to have a jig or want to build something like this. And I want to give you some tips and ideas that may help you when you're putting one of these together. And I've done this before, but I'm going to show you again. So let's take a look at what I'm working on and what the plan is. Now in earlier videos, I had pre-assembled and fit the firewall and the torque boxes. So these are already marked with places that I need to make holes so that when I weld this together, it all fits. I will be taking all of this back apart because I'm going to put holes in the kick-up panel there on the firewall to weld to the frame rails. Also, I need to have holes down here where the overlap is so I can weld those together, and also across the tranny tunnel. Now later on, I will be modifying this tranny tunnel because that transmission needs to fit in there. So there will be changes to all of this, but I have to get it fitted and together. Now, as I stress these ideas, I talk about these fitments. So right now the fender is fitting very nicely against the rocker panel, and it fits pretty decent up here. There may be some little bit of tweaking I need to do on this corner to get it up. And it still only has one bolt in it, so it'll move around and it's not going to change much of anything. The hole here lines up right with the hole that is in the bottom of the rocker panel, but the fender itself, the cutout is a little wide, meaning I may need to trim that back so that the fender can move. When I say trim it back, I mean move the hole outboard so the fender can move inboard, so you get this alignment right here on the rocker panel. Now the firewall, of course, and the alignment of everything is looking really good. The cowl panel's fitting really good. And these are the one-piece aprons that I've mentioned previously. I'm just going to go over some details with these. When I bought these, they came with these assemblies. Now in the past, I have kind of not wanted to use these, but I've been looking at them, and they actually are made pretty decent. The older versions did not fit very well, but these seem to fit pretty nicely. So I'm leaning towards using these. And one thing I noticed right off is how this section right here, I marked it already, I'm going to have to open that up because this needs to sit back further and it needs to be comfortable in that position. So I'm going to have to open that up on both of those to allow that to go back. The cowl panel, it's all pre-drilled. I'm ready to, or punched, holes are punched already, so I'm ready for that to go back together. And the here, this is the upper half of the passenger torque box. It's just sitting in there, but I did that to reference assembly of the rest of it, or I did videos previously. These frame rails, they sit in the floor supports very nicely. Like they sit right in that channel like they're supposed to. And I want to show you something again, because when I'm doing these things, I'm using what I have is this jig system that I built. But when I built the 66 Mustang, the Brooklyn Pony, I did it all on a body jig. And I did not have this stand. I did not have this jig system. So if you'll notice, there's a piece of 1-inch square tubing. And I'm doing this to show you the frame rail trick that I'm using. And this is just a verification. So on the Brooklyn Pony car, I did a video, and I'll show you a little clip of that. Here is a video, and what I was doing, because I had it on the cart, this is a secondary body. Turn that volume down. This is a factory body that I had, and I put that piece of 1-inch square tubing underneath the frame rail, and then I came forward, and the idea was I could do a measurement because now I have a rigid structure and I can verify this height location. So coming straight down, that measurement is 5 5/8. Now the idea is I'm not using any kind of jig, I'm using measurements from a factory car. So I also did that measurement in the midsection right there, and also it was at 5 and basically 5/8. So the idea is, if you're doing this, you can take something like a piece of 1-inch square tubing and put it in place and measure and get a measurement. Now right now this is reading about 5.5. So I can still adjust this up just a hair. And I'm doing this as a verification for my frame rail, because when they make these, there could be, you know, subtle variations in the stamping or tooling or anything like that, and you want that to be as right as you can get it. The idea is, if they built the aprons right and they built everything else right, when it's assembled, then all of this is going to line up here on top and it's going to fit correctly. So just some tips on that, and you can you know, look at the old Brooklyn Pony videos to see more on this. I'm using the same suspension setup on this car that I did on the Brooklyn Pony. So I'm going to take the fender off and show you some other things. So with the fender off, I can show you where the torque box fits, and I've traced this so that I know where I need to put holes so I can weld through the floor pan to the top of the torque box and attach that. And there's a bunch of other welding that will go on. I also trace around the frame rail so that when I take this apart, I know where to punch my holes going up through. Now, one thing I really want to show you is the idea that there needs to be a certain length, right? So it's one thing to push this back up against the firewall and assume everything is right. As I said before, there can be variations in these stampings that can change things. And one thing you can't change is the location of the rocker panels, right? So what I'm doing here, I took a piece of 1-inch square tubing, clamped it on what would be the mounting point for the forward or lower section of the torque box, and that gives me a place that I can measure from over here, because I'm going to show you why that matters in just a second. So if I take a tape measure and I do a pull measurement. I want to come off the back side of that piece of 1/8 square tubing, and I come forward so I can look at where this frame rail is. In this case, it's about, in this stamping, it's about 43 1/4. You can also reference where your bolts are here for your bumper mount, but again, those can be off. They are not always in the right spot exactly, but I'm just giving you some reference points. So what I have here in my arsenal is a 68 coupe under this tarp, and I've taken the fender off of it as well. If I come underneath the upper control arm and I go against the torque box back there, come forward, this is right at 43 and even on this particular one. Now the difference can be slightly the fact that I'm pulling from the mounting face of this torque box, right? So it would really be from the inside, not from the front side. So that's where you can add a little bit of measurement to that. So this is very, very close to the same measurement. So I'm very happy with that. Also, you can take measurement. Well, in this case, I have the original car here, so I can come off the edge of the cowl, and I can come forward. Come off the cowl again. Come forward to the forward bolt or the front edge of the apron. Core support, and there's 44.5, and that bolt is about 43 and around 3/4, somewhere in that range. And you can take measurements like that as well, so that when you're fitting things together, you have something to reference to. So looking at this, if I come off of that front section of the cowl and I come here, we're at, we get on that, well, basically 43 3/4. Yeah, that's yeah. That keeps moving around me. I'm trying to hold it steady, but it's right at 43 3/4. So details like that will come into play whenever the fender has to be bolted on, whenever the door aligns with the fender, when the fender aligns with the rocker panel. This, if you don't have this stuff right, then the fender can be indexed off. You could have your width wrong. So I don't put anything, make anything solid until I put everything together. So I'm going to take all this apart and punch all the holes that I need to in the front section here. I will refit everything, including the fenders. I'll set the hood up there, all that stuff, and get a good solid look at it and make sure everything's right before I throw any welds at it. Did you hear that acorn fall? Hit my carport. Now, typically I will try to use my hole punch for any flange that I have available. And the floor pan, that sheet metal is thin. We can all recognize that, and the punch will work very well on any of this type of metal. However, the frame rails are a bit thicker, the floor supports I should say are a bit thicker. And I tried to use the 5/16 drill bit initially, and I realized it might be quicker to use a smaller diameter drill bit, make it basically a pilot hole. And then sometimes I will use a step drill, but in this case I just went back with the 5/16 drill bit that I had. As you see, I have two different drills here. One is a smaller drill that I've had for a long time, and the second drill is one I bought from Mac Tools, and it's really handy for the heavy duty stuff. So as we all know, the torque box pieces, that's thick metal, and I'm just repeating the process again. I'm using the smaller diameter drill to make basically pilot holes, and once I have all those in place, then I'll come back with the larger diameter drill bit to get the size that I want. Now, as I'm doing this, I'll point out that on the upper piece, or the lower piece I should say in this case, of the torque box, I've added these holes at the face where it meets the rocker panel, but then the section that goes underneath the frame rail, I added a few more holes. and not there, but on the other side, I had a couple more on that piece. So when I put this up in place, I'm showing you where these are interacting with these other panels, and as I put this one up, I'm showing again the location of those welds. So it's really important to know how these pieces interact and where you need to put these holes, so that whenever you're wanting to weld this together, it's good and solid. Here on the firewall, I used the punch tool to initiate the holes that I wanted, and then repeat the process over and over and over. There's a lot of holes in these cars, or a lot of spot welds, and which in my case means a lot of holes. And I don't mind drilling these holes. I've probably drilled in my lifetime 500,000 holes between the aircraft industry and working on these cars. So it doesn't bother me to have to drill these holes. Verifying location of these welds, and I noticed that, hey, on that edge, I could use a couple more holes. So I do that, and I do that to both sides. I want to make sure that everything is as solid as I can get it, and I'm just verifying that everything interacts the way that I want it to. So there it is. So here's where we're at. I have drilled a bunch of holes in the firewall, and I've punched some where I could with the punch tool. Now, as I pointed out previously, all of these holes on the other side of this panel, there is a trace line that tells me where I can put these holes. So these holes, these 8 right here, they interact with the flange for the frame rail. And then these out here, they all interact with the upper torque box. Here I have drilled a series of 10 holes on the outside of the floor support, 10 holes on the inside, and then on the bottom section I actually have 9. I just put 1 here in the back instead of 10. On the floor pan, I have a series of holes punched on the front edge here, and of course you can see I have a line drawn here, so this gives me locations of where those holes can go and how deep they can go. Also, I have drilled holes in the torque box, so you can see these on this face right here, and these are also areas where I had drawn lines. Those interact with these on the front of the inner rocker panel. And then there's holes on the bottom here and holes here, and these on this section interact with the bottom of the floor support, and these here interact with this section of the upper portion of the torque box. Now you can also see that I've sprayed weld through primer on these areas. I've also sprayed that on the inside of the floor supports. I don't always do that, but I wanted to do that because sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it may not be, and currently I'm using SEM 40773 zinc weld. And I want to show you, whenever you're doing this, like I have these 10 holes on the side of the floor support. If I come back here to my Mach 1, and I can show you, they have a series of spot welds. So there's 1, 2, there may be one there, I can't really tell, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and there's probably a 10th right in that area. So there's 10 right there. And then the torque box will overlap the bottom of the floor support, and you can see they've just kind of got welds here on the edge, and there's one there. And then here is those overlap welds, where I say overlap welds, where they interact with the upper torque box. You also notice how this is overhanging, and you have this section here. It's like they kind of made it close, to where it should fit. And there's obviously variations in all of these. This one on this side is much cleaner as far as that edge, and you can also see the welds in these areas that they put in. And this is that section I've talked about where it interacts with the bottom of the inner rocker panel. Now this one is a little different because I believe they welded it here on the edge. I don't see any welds here. So I'm doing it a little bit differently. I'm adding those welds on that bottom. And the reason for that is because on the convertible pans, it's a different design. Like, you don't see this drop down edge. There is no flange here. So I'm going to make sure this is good and solid. Now, of course, as I say, there's a sequence to all of this. So we know that the firewall has to go in first. And I've already got holes punched here on the toe kick area for this interaction with this flange. And that's going to be very consistent. It should be right, pretty much straight up and down, dead on the money. However, when I pointed out earlier about the frame rails, when I put the firewall back in place, I need to verify those are set at the right depth, meaning when I put up the firewall and I put the frame rail up, I'm going to redo my measurements to make sure I get that dimension, which I think was 43 inches, and I'll verify that off of the original 68 that I have. So you want to have those right, because when you get to the top section where you have your nut plates or nut clips for the fenders, if you don't have that set deep enough, then it's going to want to push your fender forward, and you may have to do some modifications later. Now, I'm not saying I won't have to. I may have to do some minor adjusting to either those nut clips or to the openings in the fenders, just to get it in the exact spot. However, you can do what you can while you're assembling it. So I'm going to start with getting the firewall set and then verify the dimensions for the frame rails and move on from there. Once all those pieces are in place, then I can work on getting the torque boxes in the right spot. So let's get moving. I try not to think about how many times I put things together and take them apart and put them together, but I need to make sure everything is going to interact the way that I want it to. So as I was putting in this firewall for the umpteenth time, I was looking at the flanges where they interact with the rocker panels, the inner rocker panel. And what I'm actually doing here, and I'll talk about this later, is I'm opening up the gap. Even though I know it'll fit in there, it was distorting the shape of the firewall. And I'm taking a belt sander there and I'm trimming down that mating surface. I wanted to make sure that the upper plates for the torque box fit in that space without a conflict. So I set the lower cowl panel on, verify everything's fitting nicely, and then start with the passenger side frame rail. I do like these frame rails. I think it's great that they offer these. And sometimes, if you're not doing the shock towers, it's a benefit to just have these pre-built. There can be variations, though. Just so you know, there's we try to have confidence in how they make these parts, but we also know that they may not be exactly right. These are very close, and I'm happy that they fit the way that they do. Here I am welding the toe kick panel, or kick panel as we call it, on the side to the mating flange for the firewall. Same thing, take your time, weld them in, and I go to the bottom section where that panel overlaps the rocker panel and weld those in place as well. The hard part with this, you can only get the clamp in so far on that forward section. I have a long jaw pair of vice grips that I use. I tried to use some on the inside around the A-pillar, but it just doesn't fit. So as I always say, grind down these welds, knock off the excess material that you don't need, and clean them up and make them look nice. This part of the process doesn't bother me. I actually like grinding down these welds. It's something I've done even in the aircraft industry. At this point, I have welded both sides of the firewall to the kick panel, and I've also welded the kick panel to the rocker panel. So none of this is going anywhere at this point. I will not do the bottom of the firewall yet. I won't weld it because, and you probably saw in a little time-lapse video sequence where I started in the beginning, as I was fitting this, I was looking in this area right here. And in that time-lapse, I found that this was making contact in a way that I didn't want it to. I wanted a gap right there because the upper torque box has to go underneath that and through this area right here. And I found they were hitting on the rocker panel. So that's why I was going back and forth on the time-lapse. Now, before I weld the floor pan to the firewall, I will be fitting the rocker panels, the torque boxes into place. But I don't want to put those in place until I have the frame rails set. So I've been double checking my measurements, double checking my gaps, and I'm very comfortable with where this is sitting at the moment. But I forgot I need to take this back off and punch some holes through this flange on this one, and same thing on the other side. As I said, this is all welded, but I have to make some holes for this to weld to the firewall. So I'm going to take it all back apart, punch those holes, and then refit everything, and then I'm ready to start welding the frame rails into the floor supports. Also, I wanted to point out, this is the perfect opportunity if somebody is not doing what you want them to do when you're building a project, or they're messing with you. Just put a couple ball bearings in the rocker panel. That'll come back later. Just kidding. I'm not going to leave those in there. Okay, let's set this side in place. Drop it in the channel. Now, at this point, I can do these measurements. I can do that drop measurement to verify my 5 5/8. I can clamp on my square tubing, get the depth measurement that I want out to the front, which is 43 inches. But also, I need to do a square measurement. And what I mean by that, if the camera will allow me, is I need to be able to do a crisscross type of measurement. Now, I'm not ready to do this just yet, but I will do this prior to welding. And what I mean by all of that is I want to do a crisscross measurement from standard points that will allow me to know that the front end isn't out of square. Just having the core support on doesn't mean anything, and my tooling allows for movement, so you can actually shift this left and right. Okay, so you want it as square as you possibly can. So there's different ways you can measure this. You can come off of a corner up here in the back and go to the mount point for the forward fender bolt. Those should be the same, crisscrossed. Just as an example, if I were to pull this tape across here, and I'm not ready, I'm just doing a rough measurement. But this one is currently at about 61 inches to the center. And if I measure this one the same way, this one is 61 1/8. So just keep that in mind whenever you're positioning things to get the index on the front end right. The other things that I talked about, I'll do this measurement again up front here, and I know that I repeat myself a lot in this process, but I really want to get the point across that how important all of this is, because once you weld this on, you're not changing anything unless you want to cut stuff loose and start over. So measure, fit, test fit, everything else. The other thing that I did was, when I was fitting this together, I had set the fender on to verify the fitment with the rocker panel, fitment with the cowl panel, and where these bolt holes line up. So if this is off and it pushes forward, it's going to push your fender forward to get it away from the door and the rocker panel. So keep all that the same, okay? Just simple verification on this one, like I said before. So measure this dimension, 43 inches. And once I have everything square and I'm happy with all of that placement, I'll start welding. I want to give you one more idea just to verify. When you fit your fenders on and you fit your hood on, you want to have gaps, right? So right now I'm snug up against the cowl, and that's good. I don't need to change anything there. Up front here, I have a good gap coming from the back to the front on the fender, and I have a good gap on this side as well. Now this isn't fully adjusted. I just have a bolt up here in the front, and there's one bolt in the middle, but I wanted to make sure that you can eyeball the stuff. Like when you look down the body line of the fender to the body line on the quarter panel, they should all be square and in line with each other. And so that helps identify those things, along with doing crisscross measuring to make sure it's square on the inside. You really want to focus on how well do my body panels fit. Now this fender, I'm going to show you, has a slight issue. Right now it is just a hair below the cowl panel, and I can push it in and snug that up a little, but up here at the top it's not quite right, and it's rubbing on the A-pillar. Now that'll come into play later on, but I just want to show you the difference, because that one has that minor issue and this one is pretty much where it needs to be. It's not rubbing on the A-pillar, even though I have some scratches there. It's just because of movement. It's not rubbing there. I may tweak that forward a little, but that side I'm going to have to probably massage that portion of the fender up a little bit and help address how it lines up with the cowl. But all these things come into play whenever it's at final assembly, and you want to make sure everything is going to fit. So I'm very happy with it. The fenders are meeting the rocker panels like I want them to, so no issue there. The gaps all look consistent. Here's the other rocker panel and fender. Even like this distance here, it's about 1.5 thumbs, right? Come over here, and it's about 1.5 thumbs. That's pretty good. So I'm going to get ready to weld in the frame rails, and I've already double checked my measurements there, so it's all good. Okay, since I've taken 500 measurements, well, since I've done about 500 measurements, I think I'm ready to go. You know what they say, that's not going anywhere. So I'm going to get the other side set up, make sure the measurements are right, do my drop as I've done before, and then I'll get it welded at least from the outside at this point. So here's a blooper for you. I was getting ready to weld this, and I didn't realize when I moved the whip for my MIG that I hit the camera and it wasn't tight, so it just jumped up and started filming through this opening. Not good. So here's how I wanted it to look. I clamped the vice grips on to the floor supports because they are normally a little wider than the frame rails. I know I've had some people ask me about these before, and about the width and the gap. And to me, as long as I get it snug, you know, with a pair of vice grip, the clamp, then it's not going to be an issue. And I really do like welding this. You know, whenever you're welding thicker metal, it's really nice because you don't, it just has a good feel about it. So the thinner metal here, of course, the firewall to the upper half of the frame rail, I'm just filling these in and making sure that it's all going to be solid as it should be. So I do this on the passenger side as well, and you'll see I'm taking my hammer and I'm pushing down on the floor pan, the kick-up area, so that it fits very snug against the flanges on the frame rail. It's not going to fit perfect, but you can make it fit much better with a little bit of effort. Here I am welding the bottom of the floor support and the frame rail together. I can't say enough about welding. This welder really does a great job, and having this thicker metal just makes it so much nicer. Grinding down these welds in particular because I'm getting ready to put the torque boxes in, and I want to make sure that that lower piece of the torque box overlaps that frame rail and fits snug just like it did at the factory. All right, now that I have all of the welds completed on the floor support, aside from adding some paint in this area before I finish everything, I'm ready to put in the upper plate of the torque box. Now, of course, this is a convertible, so it has this extra inner inner rocker panel. So when I come in, it's just a matter of coming over that and then sliding this back into place. Now you see I've already traced this out. I know where it's going to go, and this, I think in the previous initial videos when I was doing this, I may have trimmed this down slightly so that it did not overlap this flange. You can make it overlap. You can, I know I did a video on the Slither project where I created a joggle so that it bent around it rather than overlap it and create a gap. In this case, I'm going to try to make this sit as flush as I can. And down here, this corner is always a little tricky. Now it can stick out a little. Typically I try to take a mallet or something and just knock it up into place. And the only place I have to clamp this is right here. There's a flange on the inside of this, and so I want to put a clamp there before I weld anything. Now this fights a little bit with the shape of the firewall. So right here, it's wanting to kind of fight the shape a little. So you can see it's making contact in this area. What I normally do, if I need to, is bump that up just to give it a little room so that this will sit flush up against it. Now I will add some paint here, as I said later, but I may add some weld through primer on this one. Also, this flange, as I mentioned, I don't punch any holes there. That one, when it's up against the floor support, I'll just weld the edge of it, and that's going to be fine. It doesn't need to have a plug weld. These other sections here, I've welded or made these holes. All of these will interact with the side. So I'll do a little more prep work to make sure this is all ready, and then we'll weld that upper plate in. Now, of course, the thing is, most of these welds you won't be able to see me do, like these ones on this inner flange, because it's up inside of here. I mean, I can get them in here, but there's nothing that's really happening with the bulk of this. So I've got my weld through primer back here. Get this up in place. And now these flanges are inside the car. They're not exposed. So I've got a handy dandy clamp here. Now I'll switch the camera around to the inside of the car so I can get some of these welds in. So I'm having a little trouble with my camera. I cannot see anything on the screen right now, so I don't know if it's actually recording. However, I wanted to show you what I did here. I'd done this on the other project, the 69 Mach 1, where using my trailer jig, I was able to add some bracing and push the plate tight up against the bottom of the firewall, and I also adjusted that corner up just a little more so it fits pretty snug or flush with the bottom of the floor support. So I'm I'm going to see if this camera is filming, and then I'll do some welding. Well, miraculously, the screen on the camera started working again. So let's get some welding done on that upper torque plate, or torque box. It's actually kind of tricky to do this because I'm having to contort myself sideways to push this down while I'm trying to turn this arm sideways. I feel like a contortionist. That probably explains why my back hurts. Okay, now I've got to get these on the side. I'm going to turn the heat up just a little. Get rid of the camera. Well, that's not going anywhere. Now that the upper half of the torque box is in place, what I normally do, you can see all these spots where the welds are. And it really isn't going to make much difference. I mean, I can take a little piece of Scotch-Brite and just kind of go over those. It's not really going to hurt anything, you know, kind of as a prep standpoint. But once I'm, get all those taken care of, then I usually use some like Rust-Oleum. You could use probably just about any paint at this point, but the idea is I want to get some protection on there, and just because I don't see this car being driven in ice and snow and rain and having salt on it and stuff like that. But I want to try to be as cautious as I can with what's available. So just taking care of these areas right here. And then I'll set the lower section of the torque box in place and weld it in. So I'm filming this now with two cameras because I don't know if the first camera is actually recording. I'm going to have to get a new go-to camera for this stuff. Now, what I have here is the lower plate for the torque box. As I said, I've already painted all of this. And I've done all the fine-tuning, the fitment of this previously when I first started working on getting this stuff together. So this, it fits pretty well, and it's still going to take a little nudging here and there to get it 100%. So you may have to clamp, move, clamp, different things to make it do what you want. It's going to fit just fine. I'm just saying you have to be thinking about what needs to be in place or what needs to hold together in the right spot. So just a couple little adjustments here and there. And do that. Now it fits really nice up there. It's flush against the outside here, and I'm flush against the bottom. Now the other thing that I'll do is take a jack and I will jack up on the bottom of this section of it so that it's compressed against the floor support. Now the only thing that I see at this point that is a hindrance at all is the overlap up here at the top. This could be brought down a little, but if I do that, then it moves everything down here and it pushes it off of the bottom of the floor support, and all of that really needs to be nice and tight. So what I'll do is I'm going to weld like this section on. I may put some welds over here against the inner or the outer portion of the frame rail, and that'll lock this in. And then I may take a board and drive this slightly down to make it a little snugger into the lower piece, because this right now everything else is fitting really nice. So I'd rather have this all tight and have this a little out of alignment than to have this sitting down and knock everything else off. That's good. Because really it's cosmetic at this point. It's doing the same thing. It's overlapped. It's got good contact area on the inside, it's not going to make any difference other than a cosmetic standpoint. And you know, these stampings are all over the place. Sometimes you get one that's dead on, you know, it fits super nice somewhere, then it doesn't fit nice somewhere else. So I'm okay with this. And you know, the reality is, this piece right here, in effect, it could be made a 1/4 inch long, because there's a lot of play in these things, right? So if you really wanted to, if you wanted to make it look perfect, you could trim off that little bit of an edge and it would line up perfectly flat with the piece that's underneath. Just, you know, just showing you some information. I could have easily have done that. I could have, before showing you this, I could have fitted this up, cut that off, and you never would have known the difference. So I'm trying to show you the realities of this situation. Now, of course, I have to weld these two on the inside. I'm not going to film that because it's just too hard to get a good angle. So I'm going to move on to the bottom section. Now the last part, I've got to push this piece up and do the same thing. I'll use the jack. That's it. That's it. That's all of them. Okay, I'm assuming that my camera is filming, so I'm going to go over some details with you. During this video, I showed you about putting in the front frame rails, taking different tools or materials in order to know that they're indexed in the right direction as far as up and down and even fore and aft. Now, I had put a screw in up here on the flange from the apron to the firewall, and I'm still tweaking that. I can look at it and go, well, is it exactly where it needs to be? I don't know, but I put it there because it'll help me line up the fender with the cowl. And as I said before, I stress all of this. Check your fitment of all these pieces before you do the welding. So at this point, I have welded on the edge of the plate where it meets the torque or meets the frame rail. I've welded up here, and I've welded these locations. I still have that small bit of weld to do inside of here, and of course I still have to do the other side, but that's as far as I intend to get with this video. I do plan to continue further, of course, with getting the cowl in place and welding in the apron, and I'm debating on whether I'm going to put the core support in just yet. Now everything is fixed and rigid, it's not going anywhere, but if I leave it out of the way, then when I start working on the front suspension, I have more access. It just makes it easier to get in and out. So I may take this and leave it loose at the moment. As you can see over there, the apron fits the firewall very well, and I'll have to work on these upper pieces, as I mentioned earlier in the video, and trim those to make them fit. Also, you'll notice there's some wear right there, right there, and right there. And as I mentioned with the fender, this back section almost feels like it needs to come up, and this kind of dictates that. You know, when you see these kind of contacts, something is not interacting very well. I've had to do a bunch of work on other cars where I've had to modify the fender with how they fit, because this hump area right here tends to be in conflict. This side I'm very happy with. There's really no witness marks in this area, which is great. So I'm very confident with the passenger side. So still have this torque box to go, but that'll come. And then like I said, I'll move on to finishing up the rest of the front section. I still have to do some checking on how I want the roll bar to fit, and that'll come later. And of course the back section of the car will come later as well. So I think it's looking pretty good. I'm very excited about the progress that I'm making at this point. Now again, I'm not exactly sure what I'm seeing with the camera, because my little fold-out lens thing, it's not working. So I'm going to have to get another camera, because I need to be able to see what's going on. As it is, that'll be the end of this video. Now, I encourage you to watch these videos, share these videos, leave comments and thumbs up. Do what you can to help people know that you like these videos and they're worth watching. You know, I try to give details that most people just don't. Give you ideas that will help you with your project, and I think for the most part everybody gets something out of it. So I also want to thank my patrons. They support me in my efforts to make these videos, and you know, YouTube is not the great company that pays you millions of dollars to do these sort of videos. So having my patrons help me really keeps me motivated to make these videos. So if you want to be a part of that, there's a link down below for Patreon, Amazon. There's a tip jar. So anything you want to do to help out is fine. If not, I understand that as well. So that'll be it. So until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.